Hey guys, welcome to episode 2 of our rear end rebuild. From this point, we're going to start adding back to our rear axle. In the last episode, I'll make sure to drop a link up here for that, is that we took it out of the car. I explained how that happens and we started taking some pieces off. So our parts have finally come in. We've got some awesome parts, all from Vic Auto. I'll make sure I put them in the bottom there. We've got new rotors, we've got brake calipers, all nice and shiny. We've got brake pads, we've got rubber brake lines, all new brake lines. We've got our pinion seal, because that was desperately needed to be changed. And we've also got a gasket for our rear differential cover. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but the first thing we have to do is get out there where it's already on the sawhorses and get this thing cleaned. So we're gonna take some engine degreaser, some scrapers, and a power washer, and we're gonna get this thing totally clean, totally stripped. That way, it's good to go, and we can start the reassembly process to start getting it back in the car. So let's get started. All right, so we're gonna get this all clean. We've got putty knives, we've got engine foaming degreaser, we've got steel pads, Brillo pads, whatever you want to call these. We've got bristle brushes. We're gonna get all this crud and dirt and gross, nasty grease and dirt off of this. That way it's gonna be all good to go when we get it back in the car. All the important parts that we're going to want to keep are off, minus the hard lines, but the hard lines are easy to clean out. We'll blow them out, and those will be all set to go. So we're going to get this all taken care of and nice and clean, so let's time lapse through it and get it good. We are clean. Now, she is not perfect by any means, but there was a lot of stuff on there. Some of the stuff we didn't even know, like these teal marks, looks like a little rubbed off there, but this side's got more of it. There's like a teal mark to show where the straps go, maybe. What else? These are white, actually. These brake lines are white, so they've already got the coating on the outside to keep them from rusting. That's pretty nice. And we've got some lettering on here on this side, but at least we can see it. It's all that crud and grease is off of there. We've got some more numbers here, a little bit of marks here, looks like some etching in it. Now it's not perfect by any means, but it is way better than it is, or than it was. And what's really important about that is that it keeps the heat down. So your rear differential produces a lot of heat, and that oil inside of here can really deteriorate and gets broken down over time. And so when that gets too hot and all this grease and dirt, really, truck? Gotta wait. There we go. So anyway, once all the grease and dirt are on top of it, it insulates it. It acts like a barrier. So that's what these part of these fins are for, are cooling, to disperse that heat. But when it's all caked with oil and grease and dirt, it's not doing its job. So that's why it's really important to get all that off and get it clean. You can see some of the pieces came up really nice with some power wash there and some engine degreaser. Not perfect, but it's at the point where we can dry it off and start building. Alright, so one of the first things we're going to want to replace is our pinion seal. Now in here is the nut. This is what our pinion seal will look like after we take this off. It's going to be underneath there like that. Now this is a 1 1/8 inch nut, but in there the edges of the nut are pressed in these slots that are built into the threads there. So what we need to do is take a small flathead or some sort of punch, and you can see where there's a little dot on there. I don't know how well it's going to show up on the camera, but I took a punch and punched it in. So we're going to take a punch and punch it out on both sides, and that way we can get that nut off. Will this be? We'll try this one. See if we can get that back out. Seems to work all right. And I think that did it. So we're going to take our impact to get this out. So noise alert. That actually came out surprisingly well. So you'll see there's a little, where the indentations are directly across from each other, there's a little tiny dent on both sides where it was punched in at the factory. So we can now take this end off. Just like that. Holy moly. Splines look good. None are missing. Not a bunch of pieces in there, that's good. But look at that seal. Oh, you can see it was leaking all on the back side here. I mean, that is just, I mean, look at this. That wasn't sealing anything. I mean, just awful. So it's a good thing we're replacing it. Should be able just to pop it out. Maybe not. But that is just gross. I mean, that is not sealing anything. So I don't have a seal puller, but what you can always do is put a screw in it. Don't go too crazy, but you get a little screw in there and then you can pull it out by the screw. So that's what we're gonna do. Yeah, so that worked out all right. That is just gross. Real bad. So let's get this cleaned up. So now it's time to put in our new seal. Now you can see it's got a metal outer shell and it's got a nice pliable rubber inner ring here, and there's a spring on the inside that keeps pressure on that rubber. So what we're going to do is we're going to want to set it on here. Now you have the option, if you can, put a little bit of sealer on the outside of it, and the same thing on the inside of the rubber, but I don't really think that's necessary. So what we're going to do is, if we have one, this will work. Ideally you want to have a socket that goes all the way to the edge, because if you hit it in the middle you could bend it and then you have to get a whole nother one, and you want to tap it on the outside. So what we're going to do is we'll take a really light hammer and we're just going to barely tap it in there, and the goal is to tap it in evenly. So I'm just doing this to get it started. You can do it like this. Okay, so we see it starting to go in, but it's not even. So we want to do the opposite. And we're not putting any real pressure on it, we're just letting the hammer do the work. Okay, so we're starting to get there. You just don't want to bend it. That's what I'm the most afraid of, is bending it. So now we're just starting to get hung up on the socket, so we need a deeper socket, which I don't have, so we're going to do baby taps. And we're going to do this all the way till it's seated. So the goal is to have this completely flush, and you should barely feel any sort of ridge on there. It should be nice and smooth, and your finger shouldn't get really caught on it. It should be nice and seated. So we'll do one more time around just to be safe. And you can hear that ping. That means that we're hitting the metal before we're hitting the brass, because you can hear the sound difference. So you know when we're hitting metal, and that means that we're seated. You hear all the clinking. There we go. So now we had to clink all the way around. So now we are nice and set. So what you would technically do is put this on next, but we're definitely not putting it on like this. We're gonna get it cleaned up, get all this old nasty oil off of it, and get it nice and clean and shiny again, and then we'll stick it back on. This is so much better. We can see on our surface here, there's no big crazy gouges in it, just a little bit of dirt, but we can wipe that off no problem. But it's all nice and clean, nice and shiny. All the crud is off of there, and we can actually see the surface, which is so much better. So we've also got our washer cleaned up here. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take some high temp wheel bearing and grease here, and we're not gonna go crazy. We're not gonna be dumping globs in here. Our goal is to just lubricate these splines. That way, when we first start up and start driving again, we don't have to worry about bare metal on metal touching the surface. So maybe even less than that. Let's go in here, and we're just gonna run this in the grooves. Just like that. I'm not gonna do anything crazy. Don't lose your mind here. Okay, just like that. Nice and lubricated. All the splines are filled. We're gonna do a little bit on the outside also. Obviously the grease will eventually wear into the oil, but this is to help it right away. That way we don't have bare metal on metal grinding, okay? So there's that, and we're gonna put our washer in here. Probably spread that along a little bit there. Just be safe, doesn't hurt. Just a light coating. Stick our washer in there. Let's clean up and let's get it on. So we've got our end back on here. You can feel it gripping everything just fine. So we're gonna put our nut back on. Get it started so we don't cross thread. We're gonna drive it in. And then we're gonna take our punch and get them back in there. Well, before we do that, let's check it. Yeah, nice and easy. Now we can close it up.
Just like that. You're in the way.
And just like that, we're all good. New seal is installed. The next piece we want to work on is our rear cover here. And these are all 13mm bolts. And so we're going to get them all out. The best part is we've already cleaned this from last episode, so we can already get back to it and clean it up along the edge here where this oil seeped out from the last time. And we'll be good to go back in with that new gasket around the outside. So let's get it off. Yeah, it's still pretty gross. Just gonna take one of our towels here, we'll get all this cleaned up so we can see what we're working with. Yeah, it definitely needs to come off. See if a flathead will work for us. Oh yeah. Just don't want it to rip. Peeling gaskets with a razor is no fun. Oh, don't do it. Oh, thank you. Sometimes you just gotta talk to it. Oh, only one little section. Yeah, that thing is pretty stiff. That's probably the original if I was to guess. Get this last piece off. Don't want to go too aggressive because then you'll scratch it. You'll have a small leak forever. go. Now the next task is to get all this old grease and dirt off of here. Now that's all better. It's not perfect by any means, but the actual surface where the gasket sits is relatively clean. There's not a bunch of chunks of gasket sitting there. So let's grab our new one so we can get this back cover back on, and then we can refill it with all new fluid and move on to the outsides. And now these get torqued down to 18 foot-pounds. So what I'm gonna do, 10, 18. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go in like a star pattern, much like you would do for a tire, like on your car, go in a star pattern. That way is to draw it on evenly. That way one side doesn't have more pressure than the other and it sits unevenly. That way it all comes down together. So if I can get this socket on, like that, we're just going to go in a star pattern like this. Okay, and then one more time for good measure, we're going to go all the way around in a circle. Alright, and that's how easy it is to replace your rear gasket on your differential. So now the good news is we get to start moving to the end where we can start dealing with calipers and brake pads and things like that. So let's get down to this side. Now we're ready to start on the ends. So we've got two locating pins here. These are 12mm locating pins to help you get your wheel on. So we're just going to use our impact to get them off real quick. That's one. That's two. That's how you get those off. And then we're going to have to take off our lug bolts here. Luckily we happen to only have two, so I'm going to have to find myself some more, but luckily we don't need them this very second, so they do their job just holding them in for now. Okay, those are out. We've got a spacer, this piece here. This comes off next. And now we are at our rotor. Now hopefully this doesn't fight us too much and it'll come right off. If not, we've got a little bit of rubber persuasion and that'll knock it loose. Just like that. And now we can put our new one on if you're in good shape here. Set that down, and now we're here to our hub. The next thing you're going to want to listen for is like your wheel bearings. So if you listen closely, you probably won't be able to hear it in the camera. We're nice and smooth. You see that's nice and smooth movement there. Nice and easy. Now this one is definitely dirty, so we're definitely going to take a brush. And this is just a nylon brush. And get all this off. So if you want to go one step further, you can see that there's a bolt here. You rotate this, there's another bolt here, here, and one more here in the corner. And these are 17s. So what we're going to do is we're going to do it for the sake of showing you guys how to remove this rear dust cover. That way we can get it off, get it cleaned up, all this gunk and garbage off of it, spray paint it, make it look nice and new, and then we can put it right back on. Now that those are off, this dust cover should, if you put it up flush, it'll slide right out just like that. And that way we can now clean it up. Now that we've got this surface all cleaned up, what we're gonna do is we're gonna add just a little bit of anti-seize. That way, if we ever have to bring off our rotors again, we'll be able to get it easily. I'm just doing just a little bit, nothing crazy. Just like that. Seal that back up because this stuff gets everywhere. Okay, and the next thing we're going to do is get our cover back on. Towards the back, there we go. And we got to clean up our bolts before we put these back in because we want them nice and clean. No one's going to ever see them, but at least they don't have all this gunk on them. Now we can put our nice, shiny, clean bolts back in. I'm going to add some blue thread locker on these. Nothing crazy, just a little bit. Because there's so much vibration, I really don't want these to back off. So I think we'll go with this. That way we don't get that anti-seize on us. We'll have to get it started. There's so many pieces you've got to get lined up, it's nuts. There it is. That's one. And that is already so much better just with that nice clean piece. What did I tell you about that anti-seize? That stuff gets everywhere. So the next thing we're going to want to put on is going to be our caliper. So we're going to pull it up, wipe off any loose debris before we put brake cleaner on it or anything like that. Now we're going to get this on here. Now you're going to want to line up the holes that line up with the spacer and the pegs with the small holes. So we're going to get this on here like that. And if you don't want to run the spacer, you can put the pegs in now. But I think we're going to run with a little bit of a spacer. So I'm going to get that spacer cleaned up and we'll get it set on, and we can start moving on to the brake calipers. So we've got our spacer nice and clean. You'll see the smaller holes fit our studs and our bigger ones are for our lug nuts. These have 4 of the holes, so it doesn't really matter the orientation on these. Get this one started to line it up. Grab the other one. Get that one lined up. Just like that. We grab our 12 and we ride it home. All right, that's on there. Nice and tight. Looks good. So the next part we're going to want to do is start moving on to our calipers. Now the calipers, I think I'm going to wait until next episode because that includes our hand brake cable, our lining up our brake pads, how to adjust our rear brake calipers. So let's do that next episode, but here we are. This is the exact same on the other side, so let's get that one taken care of too. Alright guys, and that is the end of part 2 of building up our rear axle assembly. We replaced the gaskets and our pinion seal. We also replaced our rotors, as well as cleaning up those parts to make them nice and fresh again, getting that old surface rust off and making them almost kind of new. We're going to be doing an exclusive episode to take care of our brake calipers. So our rear brake calipers, that's going to be on another episode when we get them back in the car. It tends to be a better example when you can see them where they belong in the car and not just on the sawhorses. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure you guys subscribe, like, and comment. If you have any questions, drop them down below. I'll do my best to help you. Make sure you guys follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Garage Time TV, and you can join the conversation there. Sometimes I do side projects in between these videos, and that's where I post them. So make sure you guys follow along there. Until next time, guys, we'll see you.